All right, so today we're doing something a little different, like way different. We're diving into, get this, ancient Israeli law.
Ooh, exciting.
Right. We're talking about the book of Deuteronomy, specifically chapters 22 through 24.
Okay, I'm intrigued. But I gotta be honest, when I hear ancient laws, I'm picturing like really old, dusty scrolls.
Oh, absolutely. They would be on Dusty Scrolls. But trust me, these aren't just some like outdated rules. They give us a real window into this whole other society so different from ours.
You mean like their values and stuff?
Exactly. Their values, priorities, what they were worried about, all of it. And who knows, maybe we'll even see some like weird parallels to our lives now.
Okay, you've definitely got my attention. So, how do we even start unpacking all of this?
Well, lucky for us, we've got an expert on ancient Israeli law in the house.
It's a pleasure to be here. And you're right, these passages can seem a little dense at first,
Totally.
but once you dig in, it's like they're bursting with like little hints about how people lived, how they dealt with each other, all that good stuff.
It's like a historical puzzle.
Exactly.
And one thing that really jumped out at me going through these chapters was this whole helping your neighbor thing.
Oh, yeah.
It comes up again and again, like returning lost animals, helping out if someone's ox has fallen or whatever. It's like this big emphasis on community, you know?
Oh, absolutely. But to get why that's so important, we got to think about the world back then. Ancient Israel, they were all about agriculture. I mean, that was their life.
Makes sense.
And to survive, they had to work together. So these laws, they weren't just about being a good person. They were about the entire community, making it, not starving.
So it was less about being nice and more about everyone pulling their weight.
Exactly. Like, picture losing your sheep back then.
Yeah.
Talk about a disaster. You need your neighbor's help to find it. So even these laws like protecting lost property until the owner gets back, even if you don't know them, that was huge.
Right, because today you find a lost wallet, it's like finders keepers, maybe. Okay, not really, but you get the idea.
Totally. Back then, it was different. They needed that trust that we're in this together kind of feeling, especially because resources, they were hard to come by.
Makes you wonder if that whole like community reliance, that shared fate thing, if it affected other parts of their lives too. Which actually brings us to another fascinating, and let's be real, kind of intense part of these chapters, marriage and relationships. Things were very different then.
Understatement. To wrap your head around laws on marriage, adultery, all those accusations of infidelity, you got to remember, this was a patriarchal society. A woman's virginity, it was about family honor, right? Directly tied to it, and to a man's inheritance.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot different from how we see things today.
For sure.
Like, take that law about a man who, on his wedding night, accuses his wife of not being a virgin. The burden of proof, it's all on the woman's family. Can you imagine the stress?
Oh, intense.
It seems like these laws were as much about social status, who your family was, as they were about, actual love and relationships.
Absolutely. Back then, a woman's virginity wasn't just about her. It was a reflection on the entire family. And of course, for a man, it was about making sure any inheritance went to, well, the right heir.
And it's wild to think that where this whole infidelity thing went down, like literally the location, could mean totally different consequences.
Yeah.
Today, that just wouldn't fly.
Right. Imagine that legal defense. But Your Honor, it happened in a field. Crazy, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, back then, that distinction between the city and like an open field, it tells us something. They had different ideas about what consent meant, how social rules worked, depending on the setting.
So even these laws that seem like super harsh to us now, there were other layers there. It wasn't always black and white.
Exactly. Like, we can't just look at these laws by themselves. They were part of this whole web of social norms, right? Worries about family lines, who gets what, even ideas about morality, divine judgment, all that mixed in.
It's mind-blowing how different it was. But then it makes you think, like, take property rights. That's still a thing today. Did those ideas come from these ancient laws too?
Oh, absolutely. The whole idea of ownership, of someone owing you if they mess up your stuff or steal it, that goes way back.
Wow.
We might have like fancier contracts now in courtrooms, but that basic idea, protecting what's yours, that's been around forever.
It makes you wonder, what other bits from these old laws are still around today in some form, even if we don't realize it?
Think about marriage laws now. They're obviously not identical.
Thank goodness.
Right. But even though those ancient customs seem, well, outdated, that emphasis on a woman's virginity, men having all the control, some of those values, their impact is still felt.
That's true. Like monogamy, the idea that marriage is a legally binding contract, that's stuck around, even if how we see relationships has totally changed.
It shows you how powerful these ideas were. Even if we've challenged them, redefined them, they're still part of the conversation. It's like progress isn't always a straight line. We keep some things from the past, ditch others, and hopefully move towards something better, more fair.
And speaking of moving on, there's definitely stuff in these ancient laws that we're way better off without, like how women had all these rules about their lives just because they were women. That's gotta go.
For sure. And it's not just the big stuff either. Like, think about that rule about mixing fabrics. Sounds kind of random compared to, adultery and all that. But it's actually a good example.
How so?
Well, we don't have fashion police today, thankfully. But back then, that rule, it tells us they were worried about social status, who's in and who's out, just based on their clothes. And those anxieties, those are definitely still a thing.
It's like you said, it's all about context. Those rules might seem weird or even funny to us now, but for them, it was about order, identity, belonging to a group.
You've got it. It's like these laws, they show us a whole society trying to figure things out, just like us. It makes you think, what can you take away from this? Like when you hear about these ancient laws, what's surprising? Does it make you rethink your own ideas about law, morality, all that?
It's wild how relevant this stuff still feels. For me, one big takeaway is that push and pull between what we have to do as individuals and what's best for everyone. That seems to be at the heart of a lot of these laws.
Totally. Like those laws about helping your neighbor,
Yeah.
making sure everyone's got food at harvest,
Um,
even those harsh punishments for adultery to protect family lines, it's all connected.
It's like they were trying to find that balance, between what one person does and what's good for the whole group. And honestly, that's something we're still dealing with.
Big time. It's like those debates about public health, the environment, even helping people who are struggling. We're still trying to figure out that sweet spot between freedom and like making sure everyone's taken care of.
Exactly. And sure, we might not agree with how they did things back then, but it's a good reminder that these problems aren't new. People have been wrestling with this stuff for, like, forever.
It really makes you think,
Mhm.
history isn't just dates and names in a textbook. It's like this conversation that we're still a part of.
Totally. So we've gone deep on ancient Israeli law. Where do we even go from here? What do we do with all this?
Don't stop digging. If this got you curious, there's a ton more to explore. Read more about those times, see how different people interpret these laws,
Mhm.
but most importantly, think about what it means for you, for the world you live in.
It's like we've opened this door to a whole new way of seeing things. Who knew ancient laws could be so, I don't know, interesting? Maybe next time there's some big news story or some debate about how we should live, you'll hear those echoes from the past a little louder.
I love that.
Yeah.
Because when we get where we come from, we understand ourselves so much better. And maybe, just maybe, we can make better choices about where we go next.
Now that's something to think about. And a huge thank you to our expert for taking us on this wild ride through history. And to you, listening, until next time, stay curious.
Welcome to Charlie and Mia's podcast. We're embarking on an exciting journey to read through the entire Bible in just 1 year. Every day, we dive into Scripture, exploring its meanings and how it applies to our lives today. We invite you to join us on this incredible adventure of learning and discovery. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss an episode.